And we'll record on this end. Okay, get ready to go live. Okay, we're just getting ourselves all locked in, guys. So, for those of you on Artist Awake, if you are watching this, just give me a quick tune. We're doing something a little different. We're actually broadcasting it directly inside of the event, I think. Artist Awake. Yeah. There it is. And let's just share this.
Did the webcam work for you, or?
Nope, I am not seeing your webcam.
Seem to turn off.
Did it come in for you, or?
It seems to be working for me. Yeah, it says it's sharing it.
Okay.
And now stop sharing. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
Okay, that's what it was happening. All right, so it was just not happening for us. All right, so we've got this shared over on Artist Awake. I think we've got you guys here over here in the live one in GoToMeeting with me, and we are looking at Johan's screen. Let me just get real clear about what we're doing. There we go. I see that, and then let's make sure that Wirecast is visible. Okay, and that's what you guys are going to be seeing over there. Okay, so we don't have Johan's webcams, but you can see his ArtStation right there on the screen. So you know who we were talking about. You know the work that we were talking about. Let's just move this over a little bit so you guys can be really clear. And what I thought I would do today, Johan's got about 45 minutes, an hour to spend with us. And we're just going to we're going to talk a little bit about this kind of crazy industries in the more technical side and what Johan does. And then also I just want to give you guys a chance to meet Johan and get a sense of how this works and kind of a little bit of the arc of his career. So thank you so much for joining me, Johan, for taking the time out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Really cool to see you.
Cool. So tell me, let's start with your arc. Like, what got you into this? How long have you been in here and what do you do now? Like, just give us a sense of that.
Yeah, so to begin with, it wasn't really my intention to become some sort of hair specialist.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird off track.
The Vidal of CG.
Yeah, exactly. No, because I started off as a character artist.
Uh-huh.
Or rather, I was studying to become a character artist, and I got a internship at Guerrilla Games.
Okay.
In Amsterdam.
Yep.
So I started off as a character artist intern, just regular character arts. And I did that for production of Killzone Shadowfall. So I worked on some of the multiplayer characters for Shadowfall.
Okay.
And then towards the beginning of pre-production, basically for Horizon, my
sorry, one second. I just did something really ridiculous. I turned it over so I was the presenter.
Oh,
can you share your screen one more time?
Yeah. Is that it?
That's it. Sorry about that.
All right,
sure. Getting punchy.
No so towards the beginning of pre-production, basically for Horizon, my character art director at the time just pretty much approached me and asked me or rather told me that we're gonna try all of these crazy hairstyles for our upcoming game, and we kind of need someone to take care of it. And are you interested?
Yeah.
That was basically how it started.
During the internship, or?
That was That was towards the end of the internship, yeah.
Oof. Oh man.
So
That's
to be perfectly frank and like introspectively a
yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
I'm okay at character arts, you know, the whole like sculpting and that sort of thing. But I realized, especially working with some of my colleagues over there, you know, Benjamin Ert and Arnold Smith, and I mean, these people are crazy, and they devote so much time, you know, to their art, and they've been doing it for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I figured that, you know, if I'm ever gonna be on this level, it's gonna take many years for me to reach it. So I kind of figured that, you know, not like doing hair would be easier, but at least it's kind of an area that's a little bit less less traversed, you know, like a bit less explored.
Totally.
So it kind of gave me some playroom to kind of, I don't know, like make my own path, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought sounded kind of interesting.
That's great.
So
And
yeah,
then
that's pretty much what started.
what was the segue from when you were intern to then when they hired you?
How do you mean segue?
Like the transition. So you're kind of an intern. It's the late end of that, and they ask you to start doing hair.
Yeah.
Was it a guarantee that you were going to be hired after this, or?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. There was basically two positions that I was kind of like interviewed for, you know, very like informally, obviously, since I've only been there for about 6 months. But it was still like kind of a transition from regular character art to either doing the hair thing or more towards like outsourcing.
Okay.
And then my other friend Björn, he took the outsourcing position, so I took the hair position, and I pretty much started off as a junior character artist straight off, you know, with the hair stuff basically.
That's great. So. Okay. All right. So, what was the process of just developing yourself as a hair artist?
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. You know, I've probably done like one or two, probably one actually, complete project, like a complete character with hair on it. Wasn't great, definitely. And I pretty much just had to learn everything from scratch. And there's not like a whole lot of information out there, you know, on how to do it properly. And there's also like, I feel like there's not a lot of information on how to make good looking hair per se, but then there's a huge discrepancy between making something that looks good and something that actually works in game, you know. And there's basically no information about that stuff, you know. How do we actually render this? You know, are we gonna forward render it, deferred render it? How are the shaders supposed to be built so we can have all of these crazy effects that goes into making good looking hair actually run in real time, right? So there was a lot of stuff to learn for sure, and I got a lot of help from my art director. Dan, he not that he had a lot of experience with hair specifically, right? But he gave me a lot of playroom to just test a bunch of stuff, test a bunch of R&D, you know, get comfortable with the pipeline that I was creating for myself to begin with, and then also for the actual project. So since I started in pre-production, I pretty much spent about 2.5 years in total just doing hair over at Gorilla, and probably, you know, 1.5 to 2 years, at least the first 1.5 years, that was just me redoing stuff over and over and over and over again, and just iterating, you know, trying to come up with a pipeline, trying to come up with results in the first place. Because they gave me like the development of Alloy, which was supposed to be this the final piece, if you will, that I was supposed to create.
Yeah.
We kept like postponing it, like pushing it, because I kind of had to learn the basics first. And I remember in the beginning, I wasn't even supposed to make the alloy assets. I was just supposed to work on more like low-end NPCs. But I would imagine, thinking back, that was just something that my art director set up just to make it a bit more tangible.
Got it. Did they have somebody who was going to do alloy?
I think we were planning on outsourcing it first.
Oh, okay.
So we worked with various outsourcing studios. They have a lot of good artists. None that specifically works with hair, but I think the original plan was to outsource it.
Okay.
But I just kept saying, like, I want to do this, I want to do this. And he was like, yeah, sure, but get good. So yeah, I basically spent like a year and a half just trying to learn. And then I started experimenting with alloy, which was this big project, right? And we kept iterating on it over and over again. We changed the style numerous times. It looked really bad for a really long time and made a lot of people very worried.
Oh, that's great. That's actually because we have a class on hair here, and I've done interviews with other people on it, and they all talk about how there's the ugly phase. And if there is any part of character where the ugly phase is long, it's hair.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. It was pretty atrocious for a long time, actually. Because as I mentioned, we had a really solid character team, and they were pulling their part. And they, I even if I was a junior artist, I had like a pretty sizable chunk of work ahead of me that I needed to make up to standard with everything else that they were making, right? So there was some pressure in it, but that's eventually what kind of pushed me through it as well, I guess.
Got it. Okay, so it was a long process, little bit by little bit, then.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you
that's something my art do. One big problem can be divided into smaller problems, and we just take small problem at a time.
Yeah, that's great. What's his name?
Dan Calvert.
Okay.
Or Calvert.
All right. So now, looking back on that, and all that time, what do you think was one or two things that were really important for you in figuring out how to do something technical like hair? Something that involves, there's so much to it, because there's also, as you said, the performance, the runtime. So looking back, you started out a total greenhorn, and now you're like one of the leading hair artists, I guess, is what we could call this. But what do you think was like one or two of the really important things that you learned or turning points in developing this skill and really mastering this?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think it's really hard to say. I mean, just on a very personal level, like nothing that actually has to do with game development per se, the technical bits of it. I just remember that after these 1.5 years, when I started working on alloy and I really got into it and kept iterating on the model, it just looked horrible, absolutely horrible. And we started crunching for the first time. We were going to show off the game at E3, I believe 2014 or 15. I don't know. Year goes by. I just remember that it was a very, very stressful period. And we also had, so basically the CEO of Guerrilla Games, he's also the CEO of Sony Entertainment Europe. And I was still a junior at the time, and I just remember that I was called into, these meetings with him and some of the lead art directors of the studio, and these very high up people, and I'm just this junior guy, right? having to like show off the progress each week to kind of give them sense of confidence that we're actually pushing it, you know, trying to achieve something. And I just remember that he came up to me one time and just sat down with me, you know, on a very, very human level, and just told me like, you know, I think you can do this. I believe in you, and I want to give you the room that you need, you know, to do your thing, basically. And I don't know what your thing is, but I think you can figure it out. And I guess that was like a turning point, just mentally, you know. Okay, it's a lot of stress, but it's also, you know, people are actually believing in me, you know, relying on me to do this. So I guess that was kind of a turning point, just mentally, like something just clicked. Like, okay, I gotta figure this out, you know. But then in terms of the technical bits,
Well, actually,
kind of goes back to,
that I think is a really important thing for us to kind of keep in mind, is the mental game of how that works. So before we get into the technical thing, what did you do different after that?
I
Did you spend more time? Did you try out more iterations?
I think I couldn't really spend any more time on it. We were kind of crunching like crazy,
Yeah.
as it were. But I think, I mean, it sounds a bit cheesy, I guess, but I just started believing in myself a bit more,
Yeah.
and just kind of told myself that, like, you know, you can figure this out. And that was basically it. Just gave me a sense of self-confidence, I guess. I think that was probably the most important, like most memorable thing
That's
in
great.
the process.
So if somebody's working on hair right now, because there actually are some students in the boot camps that are dealing with hair right now. I know it's not even actually a class. I mean, the stuff I've seen with hair, it's actually like it's its own, 6-month boot camp, I think,
Yeah.
to really to get a level of confidence. I'm sure it's a super long time, but what are some quick tips that people can use? Just either mental game or technical little thoughts on how they can organize it. Because if I understand hair correctly, the biggest issues is just is the organization. It's like the fractal quality of it, of how it's distributed.
Yeah, for sure. I think that something that maybe separates like the way I approach hair compared to at least looking at the result of a lot of other artists is that artists tend to focus too much on the hair texture. So if you want curly hair, I see most artists tend to make curly hair in the hair texture.
Right.
And then they rely solely on the texture itself to make it look curly, And if you're looking at that specific card placed on your scalp from just looking at it straight down, basically, it might look like curly hair in kind of unlit environments. But obviously, as soon as you start rotating around the model, you're gonna notice like this is a plane with a piece of texture on it. And I think I approach it a little bit differently. So I try to think of hair as a volume instead of a surface. So instead of trying to create something very specific, in the texture itself, I try to keep it very generic. So I can pretty much use the majority of my hair textures for the majority of my hair models. And then I just try to break down the hair asset that I want to make, like the reference images that I'm looking at, into smaller shapes, basically.
Right.
So
Can we jump into Unreal? I think you had something in Unreal for us to see.
yeah, sure. So the shading is a little bit off here, but the model is pretty much the final thing. Oops. Yeah, I think this is an older scene actually. Let's see if we can rotate it a bit.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, just like breaking it down into smaller shapes. I think that's the main difference, like the way I approach hair to what I see a lot of other artists do.
But the problem with breaking it into smaller shapes is then organizing the smaller shapes. So it becomes like this, because you want to organize the smaller shapes and not have it be crazy land.
Yeah, for sure. And the way I do it is I just start off with the biggest of the shapes.
Mm.
So obviously I look at the reference
Mhm.
and I may go like, let's see if I can find a reference actually for this piece. I think that could be helpful. Yeah, we got this one. Yeah, all right. So this is like, I think this is at least one of my reference sheets
Yeah.
for the one I was making.
Yeah.
So if we look at this one, for instance, there's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Right.
And it's hard to, I guess it feels like a daunting task to just, okay, make this, you know, because you're not sure where to start, basically. So the way I kind of approach it is, okay, I got this hairstyle, and immediately I see 3 shapes. So I see this shape, I see this shape,
Mm-hmm.
and I see this shape. So these are like 3
Okay.
individual shapes, and
Yep.
they're 3 individual problems
Yep.
that I need to kind of tackle. And that's already, you know, taking something very daunting, very big, like a big problem. That's already taking a problem and breaking it down into smaller problems. So now I know that I have 3 separate problems that I need to fix
Okay.
or kind of construct, you know. So if we start off with this one, I would first look at the very, very general flow. Like imagine that you have a model with crazy details on it in ZBrush,
Mm-hmm.
you know, any model.
Yep.
Imagine you just take that model and you dynamesh it to a very low level. You know, what are you going to see? What's the main shapes that you're going to see in it? Like, what's the general flow? So I basically start off with trying to build that very, very generic flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I've done that, I have, it may not look like hair, but at least I have something to start off with, like a base. And then I try to break it up into smaller shapes. So if this is the big first shape, I can already see like, okay, we got a shape here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we got another shape here, which overlays this bit, and it goes underneath this shape here.
Yeah.
And we got this shape here that kind of goes next to this one and goes kind of braids into the hair here. So then I try to work on these shapes, and I try to do it in, I wouldn't say rough, but still kind of organized manner. So I'm not going into crazy detail. I'm still not really thinking about making it look like hair,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like an actual hair. So the texture is obviously going to look like hair and all of that stuff, but that's not my focus point. My focus point is just to build these shapes using hair planes. And then the next step is just rinse and repeat, right? So you got this shape here. You can already see that we can break up this shape into like one shape, and one shape. So then I just construct these 3 shapes on top of the shape that I already got. So it's like a layering system, basically.
Okay.
And then you just go into more detail, more detail, more detail. And then you eventually wind up with a hair asset.
Okay. All right. I got that. So it's a matter of really chunking and spending your time with the layers and the thought process.
Definitely.
Do you find that this hair is not something you can just go willy-nilly into? Like you have to prepare for this?
Yeah. I mean, it obviously depends on the results you want. It depends on the budget you have if you're making it for an actual game, right? It depends on whether it's the hero character or a low-end NPC.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of factors that goes into it. And I have, you know, as you see, 2 posts on ArtStation, and one of them is 100,000 triangles, and the other one is 40,000 triangles.
Okay.
So people are already like, okay, you know, is this all you do? You know, do you always spend the entire game's budget, polygon budget, on making your hair models? But you know, you have to realize that this is just for very high-end hero characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously the rest of the NPCs, you know, like this guy here, it's obviously much lower, right? So it all depends on the importance of the character, I guess.
Got it. And so in game hero character now, the one type you're working on or have worked on, 40,000, 60,000, 40 to 60,000 polygons. Is that pretty accurate? Or triangles, I should say.
Yes, so this one is 40,000,
Okay.
and then the one for Horizon is 100,000.
Okay. Got it.
But what you also have to kind of realize is polygons today doesn't really matter as much as they did maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there are countless of ways where you can and should save performance when it comes to a game to actually make it run.
Yeah.
But it's not really polygons anymore. It has a lot more to do with shader complexity. So for every vertice, like all the math in the shader needs to be computed, right? So obviously, if you have a very dense mesh, the shader itself will get kind of multiplicatively more expensive, you know, very broad speaking. So it does add on to it, but the shader itself, definitely, that's the main culprit. You know, that's what you have to work on in order to make it run. So I guess when it comes to hair specifically, there's stuff like overdraw. So even if this mesh has 100,000 triangles and a bucket load of cards that are almost like intersecting into each other, you have all of these hair chunks. They're all being simulated, you know, individually. The way it's kind of constructed is, you know, if you have some sort of core that you can render your hair strands against, you can get away with just having transparency on a couple of hair strands and still make it look soft. So that's like a way for you to kind of save performance, I guess.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I got that.
I got that.
Okay, so we're kind of hitting up on the
we're
time. So
hitting up on
guys,
the
get
time.
your
So guys,
questions
get
out
your
if you're
questions
watching
out if
live
you're watching
in
live
Artist Awake.
in
Start
Artist
posting your
Awake.
questions in the
Start posting
chat.
questions
If
in
you're
the chat.
in the GoToMeeting, get your questions going so that I can get these asked to Johan. And I think the next thing I'd love to really get some just some feedback on, just an understanding of how this whole process works is how hair fits into the equation and your understanding of what a technical artist is or character artist. Like how does this whole pipeline work? And just imagine that you're talking to somebody they want to be a character artist like you did when you were starting, and they might think, you know, oh, I have to create just characters. But if you can give us just a sense of like what are the type of jobs or tasks or ways that this gets broken down, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Especially at Guerrilla, the definition of a character artist is it may not meet expectations. per se. At least it didn't meet my expectations. Let's put it that way. So I figured when I started that I need to be the best ZBrush sculptor in the universe to be a character artist,
Yeah.
and I need the best texturing skills.
Yeah.
And that's it, you know. But I feel like, and I know, you know, a lot of people at various AAA companies like DICE, you know, I work at Starbreeze, we got Avalanche, Ubisoft. I feel like the term technical artists is becoming more and more common amongst regular artists. Like they're starting to merge a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and technical artist doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be able to code. I don't know coding at all.
Mm-hmm.
It
But
doesn't mean
you're in a very, like, hair is a technical thing, right?
yeah, for sure. And I guess I would consider myself as a technical artist for sure. But regardless, like I don't know how to code. I can't script my own shaders. But what I can do is I can communicate with all the different teams and departments in the studio.
Yeah.
So even if I don't know how to code, I can still talk to a programmer, and I can explain it. I can explain what I want to reach, like what quality level or effect or whatever it might be, right? I can explain that to a coder so we can have an understanding, and then he and I can work towards like a common goal together. So it's more of a collaborative effort. So I guess technical artist for me personally means that I have the visual responsibility of this particular area, which is hair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my job to make it look as good as possible and communicate what I need to all the different departments, you know, to reach this quality that we're looking for.
Got it. Okay. So there's character artist, and then what did you mean by it didn't meet your standards? Like there were so many different levels of skill that not everybody was super awesome, or what do you mean?
No, definitely they met my standards and exceeded them by far. What I mean is it didn't meet my expectations.
Yep.
So basically, as I mentioned, like when I went to school, I practiced rather on how to do ZBrush sculpting and modeling and texturing. And I figured that that's pretty much all I need, you know, to succeed as a character artist in the industry.
But there was a lot.
But then I realized that, you know, a lot of these things are starting to become outsourced for a lot of big studios. And the actual game development part is becoming more, I guess, popular. It's a higher demand to find artists that can deal with the game development part in studios. So, you know, working with different departments, fixing shaders, making it run in game, making it look good in your proprietary engine or whatever engine you're using, you know, creating benchmarks, for sure. That's more where the art itself comes in, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work that revolves around actually making a game out of your pretty looking ZBrush sculpts, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's one of the things that's really been important to me, because I cut my teeth in this industry on ZBrush and kind of being the mouthpiece for ZBrush. But over the years, I was talking to Josh Herman, who's over at Cloud Imperium, and he's their character art director, which is, kind of, it's the first time I ever heard that name or that title. But it speaks to how it's so much less about character creation in terms of, hey, I can sculpt this fun thing in ZBrush, you know, and it's like the schools are now picking that up, but really now to be a character artist, that's just 1/8 at most of the entire pipeline. It's interesting to hear how a lot of that's getting outsourced. So your job and other character artist jobs becomes really about managing outsourcing and then dealing with the optimization of it after that. Is that accurate, or?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, that's a part of it for sure. But I feel like, you know, a lot of people that goes into this industry, they like doing art, right? That's kind of the main reason they go into it, because it's creative. And just saying like, okay, you're not going to do art, you're going to do outsourcing feedback. You know, it doesn't sound very appealing, I guess, to most people. But that's one part of it. And at my current job, that's a very small part of it.
Got it.
So you know, I have at my current job, I have this shader guy that I work very closely with, and that's one area where I get to feel creative, I guess, and you know, constantly evaluate the current standard we have for our characters, you know, the current results. Okay, so how can we take what we got and push it to the next level, and what is the next level, and try to define that, you know. I think that's what I enjoy the most, actually, and even more than just making art itself.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I guess there's a lot of aspects that goes into it for sure.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's get some questions, guys. And if I just know from Hair, sometimes the technical questions we're just not going to get a satisfying answer in the time frame that we have. But if we were to say drop over to Unity, that would probably be a wise thing. Not Unity, sorry, Unreal. And is this scan data, or where are you getting the model?
No, this is Vimal.
That's Vimal. Yes.
Hand sculpted it.
It's great. It actually looks like someone I know of in LA. Can we drop over into Unreal? There we go. All right. So the first kind of question that came was, how do you determine the hairline?
So there's actually a pretty nice trick to determining where to put the hairline.
Yeah.
And if you just take your hand and you take your 4 fingers on your palm, and then you just place it on your forehead, and you keep the your pinky just above your eyebrows. Your top top pointy finger that's going to touch the hairline. So if you have a anatomically correct character model, you can just place their hand on the forehead, and you have a pretty good hairline, basically, or a way to determine where to put it.
Okay, well, that will work. All right, and Corinne is asking if this is a custom shader. I assume, Corinne, you're talking about the Unreal one, right?
This is the out-of-the-box hair shader that you can get from the character. Let's see here. So if you just open up the Unreal Engine thing, I believe under Learn. Yeah, so you get the photorealistic character scene. And this is where they made the new skin shader, eye shader, and hair shader. So the hair shader I used for this project is taken from this one.
Yeah.
And then I modified it a little bit.
Okay, got it. Okay, and Adam is asking, what tools do you use to draw the hair cards? Anything you can kind of guide us with there? I think, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. What tools do you use to draw the hair cards?
XGen.
XGen, great.
Yeah, in Maya.
In Maya?
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were training on here, so good deal.
Yeah.
And then what software do you use for creating the hair? XGen. How do you optimize hair creation and still have hair look good? That's probably a long question. How do you optimize hair creation and still have the hair look good? Is quite a beast. But one of the things I'm noticing is, and I might be wrong here, but this hair looks kind of thick.
Yep. So we're going more towards 4K gaming, which is something that I'm looking forward to for sure, because that means that I can actually go towards more of a realistic hair thickness.
Got it.
But currently, so you're kind of seeing, I don't know the quality of your screen, but at least I'm seeing some of these single hairs. I mean, all the hairs, they have the same thickness on this
Okay.
model. But when you start soloing out some of these single hairs, you see that they're almost going sub-pixel. So if I were to make these hairs any thinner at all, they simply wouldn't be rendered.
Got it.
So you have to determine a thickness that goes along with, your screen resolution. And at this stage, it's currently 2K. That's pretty much the standard go-to.
Yep.
Then as we're moving towards 4K, yeah, it's gonna be more realistic for sure.
And then how close in is the model going to be when you calculate that?
Like this.
Okay.
So
Chest up.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Just chest up. That's a very good basis. And the reason for it is when you go into conversations in a game, you don't tend to go closer than this. So this is where your character should look the best, basically.
Got it. I understand that. Okay. All right. Any other questions, guys? Let me check real quick. None there. And so no sculpting the basic hair shape before drawing the hair. Adam is asked, so one of the techniques a lot of guys do is they'll actually sculpt it inside of ZBrush, and then lay cards over the top of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend not to do that because I feel like another issue that I've seen a lot of artists have when they make hair is that kind of goes along with what I was talking about previously, is that they don't really treat it as a volume. They treat it as a surface.
Right.
And what that means is that, a very common hairstyle in games is like kind of a simple parse, I guess.
Yeah.
So you just have some hair going on one side and some hair going on the other side. And what the artist does is they tend to have all the hair cards start off from where the hairline is and where the parse is.
Yeah.
And then you just layer it. But you're never gonna get a sense of depth and a sense of volume if you do that. So what I tend to do is, at least to an extent, I try to place them a little bit more evenly across the scalp.
Yeah.
And then just make sure that I layer them correctly, according to what it theoretically how they should theoretically be layered.
Okay.
If it was an actual hairstyle.
Cool.
And that's going to help you give that sense of depth. And that can be a bit tricky if you start off with like a ZBrush sculpt that you lay cards on top of, basically.
Okay. All right. Great. And then I think the last thing that we could probably ask is, and it's again another technical one, but coverage. So if you're having a hard time where your models, there's this little bald spots creeping up. Do you have any thoughts on how somebody could just kind of easily address that? I imagine it's just adding more hair, but what do you think?
Yeah, it kind of goes into the layering system that I'm using. So as I break it up into shapes, like just as I start with a model, basically, and I start laying cards on top of it to create these very basic shapes, I make sure that I can't see the scalp in between these cards. Yeah. So that acts as the I guess a blocker, something that you would kind of get from ZBrush, but it's made out of cards, basically. So then the only thing I need to deal with is the surrounding cards and the cards that are layered on top of it, and then dealing with like transitions and not necessarily too much with coverage, because that's already kind of taken care of. Okay,
cool. Corinne, let me know if that answers that. And so, all right, so let's wrap this up. And I think what would be really neat is if you can just, you have a very interesting career, right? And as I meet more and more people, I find that there are more and more just really cool, interesting careers and directions that people can take. And it's not dependent on somebody being a master of one thing or a master of another. Sometimes it's people find themselves into really just, I don't know, interesting paths.
Hmm.
So, what advice can you give for somebody who's like yourself? They were starting out, and they might be in an internship, might be looking for an internship. Like, what advice would you give them to help them kind of succeed and maybe make their life a little easier than yours was?
Yeah, it's a tricky question for sure. I think, what helped me is just to so like, okay, if you're starting off very green,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of stuff that are kind of already established in game development that you need to learn basically.
Yeah.
But you need to realize that that's just a very, very flat foundation to stand upon. And there's still, like, the industry is so young, it's super young, and you're looking up to these giants in the industry who's been in it for like 10 or 15 years, but that's nothing, right, compared to a lot of other industries. So what you have to realize is, as soon as you feel comfortable with having that sort of base to stand upon, there's so much room to kind of craft your own career and your own mindset and your own techniques and pipelines and your own ways of doing things. And it doesn't have to be specifically hair, because that's kind of a new area. I mean, it's only a new area because no one really figured that this is an area that someone should focus on,
Right.
right? I just kind of did. So we had one guy at Gorilla who he was also a technical artist, but he was more into like coding and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent like 2 years making a water and snow and cloud shader, and that was it. And now he's like the leading tech artist in the industry on how to make a cloud. I mean,
Wow.
you wouldn't figure that that's like something that you,
No.
yeah, you know what I mean? You can
Totally.
kind of like, you could push it to so many new levels if you just spend the time and you just kind of want to do it.
Go
So
deep.
there's a lot of playroom, basically.
That's great. All right, Johan, thank you so much for taking the time, my friend. It's really great to meet you and to hear a bit more about your story and everything that you're doing. So you guys can see the art station. You know where to find Johan. You can just, you want to put your art station up there so they can see that real quick?
Yeah, let's see here.
All right, make sure you follow him. Got to get that number up. To everybody here, go follow him. Yep. And again, man, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun to sit down and talk for a bit.
Absolutely. And for everybody who's watching this, head over to Artist Awake. Make sure below in the comments of the live section, leave me one takeaway that you took from this, so I can make sure I pass that on to Johan, so that he can kind of get some feedback on this as well. Have a great day, and I'll chat with you later.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See you.
All right. See you.